and I was diagnosed with cancer when I was age of 26. The CEO said, "Hey, Nigel, we're going public in 2 years' time, and we see you, Nigel, at the top table. What we want you to do is actually now lead with fear." And another thing, sack your lowest performing 10% every single year. And when I got back to the UK, Richard, I became an absolute shit. I went from being toxic to others to being toxic to myself. I was in a bar again because I was smoking a lot, I was drinking a lot, and I just broke down in front of the MD. I was like uncontrollable crying, and I left. But I'd also offered an opportunity to go and work for another company. I remember turning up on day one and saying to everybody, "Hello, I'm Nigel. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to lead this business from a spiritual foundation." Half of them looked like a cult leader should be arrested. Another quarter were like, "I know, Nigel, this is not him. This must be a false individual. This must be an avatar." And the other quarter were probably like, "Well, I'm scared. I've got no one. I like what you said, but I've got no idea what it means."
And welcome to another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Nigel Kilpatrick. He's the author of The 10 Traits of a Compassionate Leader. He's the co-founder of the Compassion Exchange. Nigel, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I always say, I always love a backdrop of books. I just love them. And I can't wait to see what books you've got in there. But Richard, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
No, it's so great to have you here. And we were put in touch by a mutual friend, and it was just one of those intros. She said, "Hey, you two should talk to each other." And then I was just blown away by your backstory, your experience in business, the arc, your leadership arc, we might say. And I thought, oh man, this guy's got to come on the podcast. So basically, I'm now asking you to come on again. Tell me everything you told me, but this time I'm recording. For the benefit of our audience. It was such an inspiring story, but we can also now get into what you've written, this book, which I've now read about 70% of, the 10 Traits of a Compassionate Leader. So yeah, tell us where you started in business, and let's hear your leadership arc.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks. I thank you for reading the book. That's great. So where did I start? So I started my career off actually in the hospitality business. I was a young lad, working in Soho, running some very huge restaurants. I ran one of the largest restaurants in the UK back in the mid-1980s or late 1980s. Had 130 staff working for me. We were doing about £10 million a year back then. This was huge. So I, very early on in my career, a huge exposure to very different, diverse types of personalities working for me. Which I can come back to because that was part of the reason how I got empathy burnout when I was very young. But then I was I felt that I should leave the United Kingdom, go and find my fortune in the US. So off I trotted, believing that the US was going to be the golden pathway to everything of success. But I got there, I was a bit disillusioned with the whole industry. But long story short, I arrived in New York, and I was about there for about 2 to 3 years, 4 years, and I was diagnosed with cancer when I was age of 26. And so I came back to the UK, got fixed. And when I went back to the US, I was just too knackered to go back into the hospitality industry, working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. So I thought what I'd do, I'd try and find an industry where I can work 5 days a week, 18 hours a day. So that ended up being the technology business sector. And I guess my first foray into that was when I knew nothing about it, a kind of happy-go-lucky kind of chap, and I just fell into this business that I got a business friend of mine to put some money into this business, and we were fortunate enough to have a pretty good ride. We sold it 18 months later. So I kind of thought, well, this is quite interesting. I think I'll stay in this business or this industry. So for the next 30 years, I've been there, and so which has mean that my career has spanned across me being an entrepreneur, raising some money for my own businesses, I came back to the UK after about 10 years living in the US, created some businesses, raised some money for them. And then I was involved in a couple of IPOs, then an MBO, all the kind of stuff that you would think. And then, there was a period of my time in my life, my career, that I was really a senior executive. And I was working for global software companies, but I was working for one small company in the south coast of England that was turning over about 29 quid. It's not massive, but 150 people maybe. But the people culture was just, you know, insanely good. Insanely good. We were doing things that were really pushing the envelope about how you should run a business and run teams and all that kind of stuff. It was brilliant. And then in 2012, the wheels fell off. You know, it was like, because we got acquired by this big Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, you know, all the things you talk about now, you see it. That kind of company, we got acquired by them. And I remember kind of anecdotally, the 5 founders of the business that I was working for kind of said to me, right, Nigel, we're off. We're going to go spend, we're going to go spend our well earned cash that we've got from this acquisition. So you're going to run it. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So my job was to try and, you know, they bought us, and literally about 4 weeks, they had dismantled our business. I mean, we all get you need consolidation and you need to do integrations, but they were so inhumane. And subconsciously, I noticed that I was noticing the impact it was having on people's personal lives. You know, they were coming into work and I was looking at them like, oh my, why are you looking so distraught? You know, we've been bought, all this kind of stuff. And they were like, no, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So I've got to go through some redundancies and the pressures on my, you know, there's no job, all this kind of stuff. It was just inhumane. But anyway, so I kind of carried on. You know, I thought this was going to be quite good, and I was, I was on the motion to becoming quite senior in this public business, so I thought quite good about that. And there we were celebrating the 1% of our organization. We were spending an awful lot of money on what's called the President's Club. We're going to celebrate the 1%. We're going to forget about the 99%, but we're going to spend an awful lot of money on this 1%. And this 1% of people, which I was included, didn't need celebrating. You know, we were making good money. We were fine. Anyway, there we were. And we were somewhere we were in Mexico, the Four Seasons Hotel. And the CEO came up to me and said, hey, Nigel. Well, yeah, my wife was there. And I was traveling like a nutter back then. And I was in LA. I got my wife to fly to Dallas. We both met in Dallas. And we flew down to Mexico. I was going back to London to fly to Hong Kong or Singapore, something ridiculous. But anyway, the conversation went that we're going public in 2 years' time, and we see you, Nigel, at the top table. Oh, that's good. That's interesting. That's nice. How do I get there? Was my response. Right. What we'd like to do, this is going to paraphrase this conversation, but this conversation completely happened. You know, we bought this company that you were a part of, and you've been helping us integrate. Yeah. And you're doing a great job because you're now running another couple of business units. So, you know, the high flyer, we can see you there. What we want you to do is actually now lead with fear. What we want you to do is create a bit of chaos the way you're leading your teams. And you know, Nigel, you know this thing that you're really good at understanding the market competition. Well, actually, your real competition's internal. We want you to compete against your other business units. So we want a bit of friction at the SLT level because we think that's going to drive performance. Oh, and another thing, sack your lowest performing 10% every single year. No reason, just get rid of them. We'll kind of cycle it through, but no reason. We'll fund it that way. I'm like, what? And I'm looking over at my wife again, and I know she's thinking, oh, bloody hell, I've only just got here. We're going to be back on the plane tomorrow because Nigel's going to tell him to second words off. But in that moment, I kind of said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I felt something. I wasn't aware of it, but I just knew something had happened internally that I had sold my soul to the devil. I put my own interest ahead of others for the first time in my career because I was a real people pleaser. I was that empathy guy. I want you to come and tell me all your problems. And I was really in it. I was a part of you. But now I'd separated my thinking. And when I got back to the UK, Richard, I became an absolute shit. Honestly, I did. I became. It took it didn't happen overnight, and the level of what happened took a while. But I started to do things like I started to shame my teams publicly. You know, I remember having a sales forecast call. I got everyone to come into the room, and I put all my sales guys' diaries on the big screen, and they're all empty. And I was like, what is going on? I'm traveling around the world. I'm the hero. Why can't you doing this? And it was awful. I remember doing things like that, and I was the guy that would have a sales forecast call at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Why? Because I want you to feel crap over the weekend. If I'm going to berate you, I don't want you to have a nice weekend. I want you to suffer. And by the way, Monday morning when we have a catch-up call, nothing's going to happen over the weekend, but I'd also have a go at you for not working over the weekend. Why weren't you? And things like that. I mean, things like, I'm the boss you didn't want to work for. I was also the boss you didn't want to leave because you're too scared to. That was kind of really going on. And so eventually there was a moment when I was able to leave this company, which I did. I was able to work with some other colleagues who had started another company very early on, very embryonic phase. And I was able to take a lot of customers out from this other business, big global customers who were getting very, agitated or frustrated by working with that company. The culture was terrible. So I found another company to grow our business from, which we did. We grew the business really rapidly to about 30 million or 35 million space about 3 or 4 years. We hired about 300 people. We were flying high. I mean, we were winning awards under the sun. We were on it. But for me, I felt that I was focused on the top line revenue and the EBIT because I was looking for an exit. I was looking for early retirement. So I was focused on those two bits. So I was really in a world of uncaring execution. That's all I cared about. The bit in the middle, I didn't really care about the people. So I missed a golden opportunity to shift from being the toxic person that I'd become into something else. But I did notice something, Richard, that was quite, in hindsight, in reflection, I went from being toxic to others to being toxic to myself. So in this particular business, it was a kind of a shift, and I started to spiral out of control. And I started to make horrendous decisions, both personally and professionally. I was, again, living and operating from this lower hand quadrant called uncaring execution. I was being a bit of a bully, bit of a, an odd person, but I felt it, and I really began to spiral out turn to a point where I turned up for one meeting that I was going to tell everyone the strategy is going to be going forward. I just hadn't prepared, didn't care. I lost it. I was deflated, but I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on. And a couple of days later, I was in a bar again because I was smoking a lot. I was drinking a lot. I was eating very badly. And I just broke down in front of the MD. I was like uncontrollable crying. I just couldn't understand what was going on. But I was becoming self-aware enough to know that I had to do something, because I knew perhaps that one of two things were going to happen. Either I was going to do something silly to myself, or health was going to get me. I had the experience when I was 26, so the indicators were all there. Anyway, I sit here today and health has got me. But I started to really reflect and go, well, this is good. You've got to get yourself out of this. You've become so self-toxic that your natural state is toxic to others, but now you're toxic internally. So I was able to throw all my business books in the bin, and I was a bit of a geek around people like Tony Robbins, and I ripped that book up and threw it in the bin, and threw all my CDs in the bin, and that is just not the way to live. It really isn't. I started having a bit of a go about all of that kind of egotistical stuff, and I started to read a lot of spirituality, which I really it saved me a lot. And that was a journey in its own right. But a journey that was manifesting at that time, when after I broke down, I was kind of self-sabotaging myself to get myself out of that company. So almost telling them, almost like fire me kind of thing. It's like self-sabotaging. And I left. But I'd also offered an opportunity to go and work for another company. And after I'd gone through the self-awareness bits, leaving this current company that I've been in the world of self-toxicity, giving a mandate on the new company saying, I'll come and work for you, It was an American software company going public, and thought, oh, good, here we go again. But we had a lovely set of conversations over 2 or 3 months. And I said, listen, my non-negotiable is that I must lead this business from a spiritual foundation. I must. Otherwise, if I don't, I'm not going to come. I'll go and do something else. I mean, I'll go and work in a garden or do something. I'd love to do that. But so that was my single non-negotiable. And it's, yeah, great. So the people culture was absolutely terrific. It was fantastic. This is pre-pandemic. I remember turning up on day one and saying to everybody, hello, I'm Nigel. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to lead this business from a spiritual foundation. Half of them look like the cult leaders should be arrested.
Yeah.
This is the tech business. We don't do that. Probably another quarter were like, I know Nigel, this is not him. This must be a false individual. This must be an avatar. And the other quarter were probably like, well, I'm scared. I've got no one. I like what you said, but I've got no idea what it means. And I didn't really mean it. I didn't know what it meant either, to be honest. But I knew that I was talking then, because all of my spiritual reading and studying, I became an absolute fanatic on A Course in Miracles. That, you and I have talked about that.
Mm.
And I went from Wayne Dyer and I went to Marion Williamson and eventually I went to A Course in Miracles. And I began to really understand how those teachings of spirituality really lay the foundation for a good business, a really good business. So when I got there, I started to do things like change the operating model completely. I started to measure everything about how, if we're being nice to each other, if we're being kind, if we're using, really powerful intention to make some changes where everyone's inclusive, it was safe, then could I measure that? And this was the time during the pandemic, at a time it was most needed. But a time that I was working for a company that was scaling like mad because our technology was a part of Microsoft Teams. So it was nuts. So I was asking everyone to do very different things in very difficult circumstances. So after I left that business, came out, I loved that period of my life because it taught me an awful lot about how to get back to myself. And then I came out of that situation just after the pandemic, just after lockdown. I was looking around going, oh, wow, like we all were. Wow, the world's broken. We have a lot of people scared, full of stress, full of anxiety, and there's no playbook for leaders. There's no playbook for managers. There's no playbook for managers who have just been promoted and they shouldn't be because they're not ready emotionally, tactically, or strategically. So I said, I'm going to create a little business. So I did a consulting business called Compassionate Business, which was aimed at, I had this framework that I can go into all the business leaders and say, hey, we can do things differently here. And by the way, it's good for business. And by the way, the word I'm now using is compassion. I said, compassion is profitable. It's good. This can change your, I think like compassion can change your EBIT. Compassion can change your performance. They're like, who is it? What is he talking about? Isn't compassion just nice and kind? No, I think this is strategic. It's imperative. It's what the world absolutely desperately needs. And it's so critical. I want you to have a new KPI. I want you to have a new dashboard. And I called it the compassion operating dashboard. Because it's meant so much. Anyway, long story short, and I've been talking for a long time, so that was a bit of a misnomer. I was talking to my wife about 6-7 months ago, and we were talking about, I can't scale this word compassion enough. I can only get people to understand what it really means and the power of it, the people I talk. And Jane would say, yeah, you know what? I'm seeing, because Jane is a family coach, and she's helping a lot of teenagers go through very difficult circumstances, things like exams, and she was a qualified hypnotherapist, and she was saying,
"This is your wife, who you know?"
Yeah, my wife Jane. Yeah, most forgiving individual in the planet. I want to add and call out. If you want a lesson in forgiveness, talk to Jane. The saying there's so much more stress coming from work and coming into home. So we kind of had a light bulb moment. So why don't we bring those two worlds together, home and work? So we created this online community called the Compassion Exchange, which is, and I'm sure we'll probably get into it in a minute, but it's designed to do that. It's redesigned to get everyone to start taking the hats off. We all wear through the course of the day and realize we're just human. And actually the way to build and operate a business today it is no longer what it was 5 years ago. It's different. We have to be compassionate, not empathetic, but compassionate.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was the longest intro, I think. Brilliant. I love it. I love it. Wish you just got it a wrap. That's kind of everything. No. So the first question I've got is, so I love the story, but when and I'm visualizing that moment where you tell your team, I'm going to run this business on a spiritual foundation. Um, what are some of the first things that you did? You did talk about this sort of spiritual operating model, what are some of the first things that you implemented, and what were some of the lessons you learned, maybe successes and failures, in starting to operate differently?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the first thing I had to get myself ready for was to say that, because I think that I probably ignored my faith for about 40 years. I'm almost embarrassed to admit it that I had a lot of faith. Not necessarily religion, but faith in God. And that was now at the forefront of my belief. So should I say it? Can I say it? And what happens if I did say it? I had so much belief in that. I just had to say, Nigel, you've got to be true to yourself and say it. So that was the first thing is, realize, self-acceptance to what is true, stand by it, live by it, because I had also begun to understand, the traits of what it means to be a compassionate leader, and trust and honesty are those two things that you have to be completely aligned to. There should be no break in that. So what I started to do though was, all the functions were operating so separately. All the KPIs, all the metrics were very functional in silos, and I broke all of that down. So, I created a new thing called, a new operation model that's very people-centered. So everyone has a direct contributional link to each other. And everything points to one thing, a bit of a spiritual thing. Yeah, I said, we're all going to call all point north. Now, from a business perspective, that's all to do with the customer. To me, it was a bit more deep than that. It was like, we're all going to point north for a reason, but that was a kind of pedestal I was putting our customers on. And nothing that everything had to point towards that. So when we had this incredible IT manager who felt completely left field and not really included, he was just a great guy, but not really included in what we were doing. I said, now you're in because your metric is directly connected to someone who's in selling, because you've got to make sure they've got all the right tools, all the right access, all the right broadband, everything you're doing is directly related to what that individual is doing. That individual is selling completely now. Will call you up and say, thank you for what a great session I've had with that customer. When my laptop was working. No, that was how important it was. That was the metric that we started to look at. Not, how many laptops have I bought this week, or, that's not the metric. It was, what am I doing that helps that individual give the best possible customer experience that we can do. And then I started looking at policy, because policy was like, policy's everything. Process is everything. But it's just no longer right. It's just not. The words should be ripped up and rewritten and rethought again. So things like, basic stuff like having a dress code policy that's 7 paragraphs long. I mean, come on. Really? Let's have 2 words, dress appropriately, boom, put it away, move on. Because if you're getting this bit sorted out, if you're getting the inner bit sorted out, then these things you just trust them naturally. And everyone begins to kind of realign their thinking and the way they operate. And grievance, it's like, grievance was, oh, we'll give you 5 days out of the office. I'm like, no. People grieve differently. And there's no time, you can't put a boundary on time when people grieve. Take as much time as you want. That's what we'll do. I mean, now I'm thinking to people, I'm talking to brave leaders from an operating model perspective and thinking, we really are addicted to performance, right? Which means we're addicted to effect.
Yeah.
We have no time to go into root cause change. I haven't got time. Reason why we don't have time is because we do our budgeting forecast, we do our financial predictions that are 12 months long, right? That's the boundary. At the end of 12 months, everyone's going to get their bonuses or performance metrics, but no time to do what we need to be doing. So I'm raising questions like, well, why don't we just change that? Let's keep the the importance of forecasting, but let's push it out on the 12 months. Let's do a 24-month goal. And let's do that. And let's go start fixing what needs to be fixed underneath. Because if going back to that question that was given to me in Mexico, sack your lowest performing 10 to 15% of your employees. Well, that's because I'm thinking and operating in a boundary of 12 months or 1 quarter or 12 months or 52 weeks or 8 hours, whatever it might be. That is the boundary I'm thinking on. But we can change all that now, and we have to change it because after decades and decades of mismanagement, after decades and decades of egotistical leadership in business, we have a whole world that is now broken. In fact, we've got 1 in 4 of our workforce, and this is really serious stuff. This is what I want leaders to start to measure. You've got 25% of your employees who are turning up sad, anxious, angry, or scared. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. You've got almost 80% who are turning up disengaged, which means they're just turning up to get a paycheck, which means they're not have no feeling of contribution, which means they have no feeling of contribution at work. They're going home and spreading that spider web of anxiety and stress and sadness. So the home impact is having an impact on home life, which is in turn is having a huge impact on our economy. It's just not right. No more. We all have a responsibility to change this. I'm not saying that my way is the right way. I'm just saying it's another way to redo this, to get us back into the center of human-based leadership, because we have to stop. We have to stop this pretense that egotistical leadership, fear-based leadership, aggressive cultures are good for business. They're not. They're catastrophic for business, and that's what we're seeing across every economy, in politics, in education, in business, in healthcare. We've got to change, and we've got to change now.
Yeah. No, there's powerful stuff in it, and something a word that you used, which I highlighted when you talked about your champions of compassion mission statement, and you say, we believe true leadership elevates humanity, not ego. We've just talked about that. Success without compassion is failure in disguise. Every leader has the capacity to heal, to inspire, to create something better. So this word heal is interesting. Now, how did you relate to healing in your leadership?
What a great question. You asked great questions. Well, I had to self-heal, right? Which means I had to self-reflect. And when I came out of all that, I was able to heal an operating model. And I look at it differently. I was able to heal the elements that were causing friction or tears or wounds in the way that we operated it. And that's what healing really is all about. If we can get to a first point, though, which is how do we self-heal? How do we really take the time to look inward? And I'm a big believer in, thanks for A Course in Miracles and other great bits of writing, that the only way to get out of performance is to get in a performance first. But no one has the time to do that. Yeah. So there's no break between the inner to the outer. So and also healing comes from being consistent. So I need to, as a leader, as a people manager, or an operator, no matter whoever I am in business, because, by the way, when I talk about compassionate leadership, there's no hierarchy to it. There's no job title to it. If you're acting with compassion, to me, you're a leader. So we have this wonderful clean line between the way I am being consistent with every thought and action I have, so which is really rooted in my identity, really rooted in my non-negotiable values, and that's trust. That's self-trust. That's what we have to get first of all, is self-trust. And then when we have self-trust, we have this thing that beautifully comes out, which is self-honesty, because everything's aligned to my identity and what I believe, and my non-negotiable values. Therefore, every word that I say, every email that I write, every proposal that I send, every marketing campaign that we produce, every advertising bit, all of this is true. Right now, without that, they're just a whole bunch of lies. We lie corporately all the time. We pretend that we want our customers to believe what we want them to hear. Well, that's not centered. That's not rooted. Come on, if there's an issue, let's be honest about it. If we're not ready, let's be honest about it. That's what healing, self-healing first, then you can only then begin to heal the way that you operate and heal the culture.
And I love this line. Healing is being consistent. I've not thought of that before, but you're absolutely right. Like if I go to a therapist and like 4 out of 5 times they listen well and, they're really caring. And then 1 in 5 times they start giving me a hard time and I start feeling scared of them. I'm not going to heal with that therapist, right? They've got to be open-hearted, loving every single session. Otherwise, I'm not going to heal. And the only way they can do that is be consistently doing their own work, right? Clearing out their own stuff. Yeah, always as a lifetime practice. So that's something they hadn't put those two together, but you're absolutely right. And that would have absolutely been the same, as a leader in a workplace, right? If you were a great caring leader, Monday to Thursday, you're an arsehole on Friday, you don't have a safe culture.
Well, you pick up another great point is that if you're a caring father, mother, caring brother, sister, caring aunt, uncle, caring friend, and you're not caring at work, how can you live like that?
Mm.
I used to live like that all the time. And I'm pretty convinced this is why I've got 2 cancers today, because I was in such, there was no consistency between what I was feeling and living versus the way I was leading and driving my performance. Those 2 things were so out of kilter. But imagine if it was just complete harmony, or we can heal that bridge between those 2 worlds, because we are not separate from those 2 things. These being a father, brother, sister, mother, they're roles that we play. These are also roles that we play at work. I'm a VP, I'm an MD, I'm a marketing manager. They're just roles.
Yeah.
They're not who we are. We're going to get back to who we really are, have a deep sense of that alignment, and live like that every single day. And only then do you experience real joy. I mean, real joy. Imagine going to work and having joy every single day. Imagine every member of your team, every member of your workforce arriving to work with joy. Imagine that. Imagine what it's going to do to your business. Imagine the customer loyalty you're going to get. Imagine the contribution your employees are going to feel. Imagine how you feel as leaders. Imagine the decisions that you now can make based on not having to defend yourself all the time. Because business people are in a constant world of defense, which means all we're really doing is attacking. Because defense is a form of attack. I don't like what you said to me, therefore I'm going to tell you something differently. I'm attacking you. So defense is a form of attack. We have to stop this. We have to get to a point where joy is our North Star. That's what we're working towards. It's not going to be quick. It's not easy because other things have to change. And my big worry is that, I can have everyone running around the business being so compassionate, having, listening with empathy, not leading with empathy. And I don't want to, maybe we can cover that off, but listening with empathy, but acting with compassion all the time. But unless the operating model and the culture is supporting it, then we're going to have friction. And we already have friction between a new generation of leaders coming in. That's called, I don't want to pigeonhole them, but this is what everyone calls them, the Gen Z or the Gen Z world, and the Gen Alphas who are coming into work. People my age, and, they just we don't understand them. Like, and I get a lot of people saying, oh, they're entitled. And I used to kind of feel the same thing and say, well, actually, what do you mean by the Gen Z are entitled? Oh, I've got so many different expectations. They don't want to turn up to work until 10 o'clock, or they want a 4-day week, or they want all these things. And I'm thinking, thank God for entitlement. If that's what they are expecting, change their emotional intelligence is really high. Their emotional resilience is not very high. That's what we have to fix. But their intelligence is really high. Let's fix that. Let's learn from this incredible generation who are just more human-centered than my generation are. So I think, I'm rubbishing on a bit, but that's what we've got to do, and that's the mission that we're on, to try and fix.
Well, I think that's right. And I recall a workshop that I led at a big media organization, and we were debating about feelings. And is it okay to share your feelings in a work context? And there was a big generational divide. The people who were on the cusp of retirement were saying, no, absolutely. We need to be professional. We leave, some feelings is something we leave at home, and we're here to do a job. And then the younger generation was kind of outraged and saying, well, no, hang on, I want to bring my whole self to work, and I want to be able to express my feelings. And you saw it, the stark divide in the room. And I think you're right. I think the Gen Z is exposing something. They're saying something here that, we're reacting to in different ways, but there's something real that's shifting in the culture.
Yeah, bring it on. Bring it on. Anyone who says, oh no, I need to be a professional, I need to be, oh, come on. You've got to release that anxiety from yourself. I used to do it all the time. I used to, don't bring your work problems, don't bring your home problems to work. Well, today, for a lot of people, that's the same environment. Because like you and I are both talking from work at home. And that's the same for, for a large portion of our workforce today. So, we've got to be a bit more realistic, and we've got to be a bit more, let's ban the phrase, no, we can't talk about emotion. We can't take it in. We've got to allow everyone to fully turn up as who they are as humans. Anyone else, that's the negative. We've got to change this quickly, because we're in a huge problem. We've got an individual sitting at, in America, that's allowing this kind of toxic work culture to exist, this fear-based leadership to exist, and without consequence. So I'm really worried about that. I mean, that is a huge knock-on effect of how people can have an excuse to build a fear-based culture. It's just not acceptable. So we're going to stand up and fight for what needs to happen.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because that probably touches into another aspect. And I had this conversation with a guy. Are you familiar with the technology base camp?
No.
It's a project managed software.
Okay.
But anyway, he's very successful, entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. And we were having the debate over, there's a sort of limit on bringing your whole self to work. And from his perspective, one of the limits is around political affiliation. And he was saying that was something that really isn't to be discussed as part of the workshop culture. The business is there to perform a role in society. It has a mission, and it's not there as the place for political debates to play out. And so what's your perspective on that?
So basically you're saying that we can't allow political perspectives to play out at work.
Yeah. And he was, the Slack channels were sort of getting filled with the sort of pro-anti-Trump, debates, whatever,
But what are the signal? What's the signal? What's the underlying signal that this context is being? I'm scared. I'm worried. I've got Either way, anything going on, all this kind of debate that's going on throughout the world of what's happening with the US signals we have fear in our business. We have anxiety in our business. Therefore, if it's being expressed, again, that's the effect, not the cause. It's just the effect. Slack is just the effect. Teams is just the effect. All these things are just the effect of everything. We've got to get to root cause. These are signals that have to be managed. Either way, if you're going to enforce, no, we don't have it. You can't have political statements said in our business or our enterprise. It's a tricky one. If you are going to make that policy, do the policy change humanely. Do it with absolute humanity. Do it gently. Do it softly. Don't do the typical. No, not doing it anymore. You can't talk about it. Boom, boom, boom. Well, you're just cutting off. You just. It's so silly to do that kind of stuff. If it was me, I would allow this this conversation to be had safely, without. There's a difference between what is different versus what's harm. So in trait number 3 of my book, I talk about tolerance, and, built on, trust, honesty, and tolerance. And there's a real defined line between what is different and what is harm. Now, can I really decipher in the architecture of enterprise communications what's okay to be said that's different versus I shut down what's harm, what's bias, what's aggressive, what's attack? Can I shut those two things down and allow, we'll call them a green zone and red lines. A green zone, allow the difference to be talked safely. Red lines, shut down immediately, not to be had. That's where you have to start thinking about policy. How do we create these environments? What fits into one zone and what fits into what fits in the green zone? That's difference. That's welcome difference. because, otherwise it's, I don't know what you call it, but it is, it's unilateral, just ridiculousness. But anyway, let's put it into the green zone, but let's shut down red zone. Our red lines, what's bias, what's aggression, what's attack, can't accept it.
Right.
But that's how I would see it. Tolerance.
Yeah, tolerance, and then choosing consciously as a business where you draw that line.
Yeah, you got to. I'm not saying I'm not saying everyone's going to run around and talk about these things and be blah blah blah. You got to be nice. No. We need the boundaries, but we need to be open-minded. We need to allow it to happen. And I would say not just from this kind of example, but every kind of policy change, we need to change radically. We're doing a talk. I'm reading another thing that really worries me. I know it's a bit left field here, but another thing that we're talking about in our compassion talks in the exchange is how to do layoffs. They're brutal, but they're driven by policy and process and procedure. They're driven. The underlying tone of doing layoffs or redundancies is a legal constraint. It's a legal driver. I know why it has to happen. I'm not saying that the financial situation of any company shouldn't force people to be let go of a company. I'm not saying that, but the way that we do it is the wrong way around. We start with a human intent first, then we do the legal bit second. We don't do legal bit first and the human second. So all these consulting periods that people start putting in place, they start rethink it. I was told never have a conversation with anyone until we're absolutely certain we're going to let them go. Grievances, same thing. Why do we have a grievance? We're managing grievances in effect. Let's get to the bottom of why we have them to begin with. Let's go into a deep root cause change. Then we'll have a better work environment. Then we'll be able to change radically the way businesses are operating and performing. Because right now we are in the... That makes sense. I'm not sure, but that's what we believe.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about this. This seems to be a persistently getting to the root cause. And I think before we do that, let's just talk about the definitions of the words here, because I think it's useful to bring that in. And we mentioned this before. So what is the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion? And then let's talk about getting into root cause and what that means for a leader.
Right. Okay, because I think that's a good segue. There are 4 states of how we decide. Can't get away from it because the way the human brain thinks is the way the human mind thinks is the way we look at all external factors going on. First is pity. And to me, let me just give you an example of what pity really means. You walk past a homeless person in the street. For now a second, oh, thank God that's not me. Move on. Yep. Sympathy is same situation, and I'll put it back to business in a second. Walking past a homeless person. Oh, that's a real shame, yeah. It sits a bit more, it's like, oh, that's a real, yeah, that's not good in society than looking at someone who's homeless in the street. Empathy is the next level up, which is you probably will sit and have a chat with the individuals who's homeless, really you be a good listening ear to that individual. You'll do something a lot more. You'll raise your activity to a point of having empathy. So pity, sympathy, empathy. But these are emotional states. You're not required to do anything. You're required to have emotion. This is dangerous. And this is the difference between what empathy is and what compassion is. Compassion is intentional. You must take action. So you rise above the state of being empathetic. You move away from empathy and emotion and you cross over into intention. That's action. A lot of people call it, compassion is empathy in action. That's what it really means. But that's what we need to be doing. So that's how we define those things. A lot of people in business don't really understand it. I see a lot. People think, oh, I'm an empath, or we lead with empathy in our business. No, we've got to stop doing that. If you're driving this thing, if it's well understood, he's saying your people managers and your leaders, lead with empathy, then I'm going to get consumed by everyone's problems. I'm not taking action. I'm just consumed. From my own personal life, where I talked about at the very beginning, to me, because I wanted to be everyone's best friend, which meant I wanted to be accepted. So as a young people leader, young people manager, that's what I did. I went out and kind of sought their problems because I felt like I wanted to be accepted, right? But then I got so consumed by it because you could tell me your problem, Richard, that's one-to-one. But I've got 10 of you. So all of a sudden I've got 10 issues. Therefore, I'm getting consumed by it. Therefore, I get caught in the empathy trap. And then what happens when I'm in the empathy trap is I start to hide low performance. So if you tell me your problem, you've shared with me a secret, I've got a little special status with you in a special relationship, you tell me a problem, and you start to not perform, I will hide your non-performance. I will start making excuses up for you because you shared something with me. But you never came to me. That's where you go into empathy burnout, by the way. So you go from empathy trap into empathy burnout. You never came to me wanting me just to listen. You came to me wanting to be take action. That's why you shared your problem with me. So that's the real difference between empathy and compassion. Compassion has no stress with it. It doesn't mean, when you're acting with compassion, you're able to do things that are very difficult and hard to get done. You're confronting layoffs, you're confronting grievances, you're confronting market, detractions in your market. You're doing all these things that are difficult, but you're just able to do it in such a humane way that takes the burden off the individuals having to cope with it.
Mm.
So even in times of difficulty, because you're doing things with compassion, as a leader, as a people manager, you're not as stressed out. You don't have that pressure of the tax, the emotional tax is being drained on you. You're able to do it so much differently. Therefore, your individual performance rises, but also your trust rises, your honesty rises, your tolerance, all these things begin to rise as you're doing things with compassion because you're taking action.
Right. But how does that work? Because if it's empathy plus action, you still need to do the empathy bit, right?
You need to tool it, not lead it. So empathy is a tool, a listening tool, a very powerful one. So, I'm not saying, what I'm trying to say is, from a leadership perspective and an approach, don't just stop at empathy. Push on forward. Go higher. Start using the word compassionate leadership and understand the difference between empathetic leadership and compassionate leadership. The two are fundamentally different.
Right.
They're closely aligned. One leads to the other. But you can't not have compassion because that's the bit that's the intentional bit. That's the action bit. That's the decisiveness bit. That's the clarity bit. That's the honesty bit. These are all the things that's the tolerant bit. It's the open-minded bit. It's the patience bit. It's resilience bit. That's what all sits inside compassion.
And could it also be the tough love bit on occasion?
It is tough love, because you're doing it very humanely. But you're not walking away with, oh my God, that was such a difficult conversation. I feel so bad myself for having the want to have it. No, it's like, I'm doing all the things I need to do up front. So before that conversation has to happen, the person I had to have a difficult conversation with is fully aware what's about to happen. Because I've done it with compassion, not empathy. I haven't listened to I haven't been led by legals. I haven't been led by HR. I've just done it in a very humane way. So when it happens, we both know what's happening. And it's done with such integrity. People use the word authenticity a lot. It's a strange one. But there's so much integrity that is centered on that.
Right. And so I've got a challenge I sometimes have when, I've been thinking of a particular senior editor at a media company. And I was suggesting to him that we should have a session where we just allow people to be open, about where they're at in this particular change scenario. And his view was, oh, no, Richard, I don't want to set the hairs running. If I set that up, who knows what's going to come out? And I don't really know if I want to hear, whatever comes back. What is your counsel to a leader in that position who's got those fears?
Well, I would take them through what I have to do. So this is a lot of self-reflection in the mirror, right? What am I scared of if I hear something that's true? What am I really scared of? And actually, I would be counseling and not counseling, but coaching the leader on this bit. These conversations are gold. absolute gifts of gold. When someone is telling you these rabbits that might be running, these difficult conversations that might be happening, if you can just self-forgive. I'm talking about having forgiveness as conflict management. Use forgiveness as conflict resolution. It is so immensely powerful. But self-forgiveness first, and then you're able to welcome what's being told, because they no longer, you no longer believe these are self-reflections on you as a bad person. They're just as what they are. And you can do something about it. So, because most people say, I don't want to hear it because it's on me.
I hadn't really considered that, but that may have been 80% of his fear was actually how it might be reflecting on him. So not so much that it was just going to be stressful for him to handle, but it was how it would be.
It is self-reflection, because that's why people don't want to engage in the conversation.
Mm.
But if it's, I often now, I will, if I'm going into a meeting that I know is going to be conflict, I forgive the people in the room before I walk in, saying, this is not on you. This is not on me. It's just what it is. And let's deal with it. Let's deal with it in a nice, gentle, calm, nice, gentle turn away. Let's deal with it.
Yeah.
Life too important to be worrying about what people are telling you.
I like those. I like two things you've said there. One is that these are gifts of gold, because of course they are. Now we've got something to work with. Now we know the real situation. But the second point is self-forgiveness. If I can go in equipped and prepared to forgive myself for anything I may perceive that I've done badly that has somehow resulted in this, if I'm ready to forgive myself, then I'm much better able to hear what I might not be wanting to hear.
Yeah, and don't carry the past either. I mean, don't carry yesterday into today, because yesterday doesn't, as you know, very well know, yesterday doesn't exist, But in business, we are absolute experts at doing historical analysis all the time, self-internal historical analysis. You know, what was I? It's almost like you're a business leader. You were once the person that was giving bad news, or you were once that were giving a grievance. You were once that were doing that. How did that feel? Why were you doing it? So, just don't bring yesterday and today. Just be centered and have self-trust, self-forgiveness, be tolerant, be open-minded, be gentle. I think gentleness is a real powerful trait.
It's another real trait, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, gentleness is, I have my favorite trait, which is trait number 6, which is generosity. But when you've kind of got these traits they're building, so you've got first trait, which is trust, and then you've got honesty, and these two things are so interconnected, then you're able to be truly tolerant, self-tolerant. So when, to your example, you're walking into this room and like, I don't want to open all these kind of worms. If all of a sudden if you're tolerant, then you're able to take them, and you can deal with it. Then you have gentleness and how you respond to what you're hearing. Can you be gentle on yourself to not get into raise your anger, raise your rage about, my God, you're saying this a bit against me, I'm taking it all on me, blah, blah, blah. No, be gentle. Then you move to self-compassion, which is doing all the things you need to do to take care of yourself. But then you have generosity. And I love this trait because I call it my selfish trait. Because the more you give, the more you get back. And we should be absolutely selfish in how much we give our generosity to others, is what we get in return. It's the simple stuff. Pat on the back, the congratulations, being generous to myself, being generous to others is so great. And do it because of all the other traits in alignment. It's so centered on who you are, in your identity, in your values, an individual. And don't forget now that every word coming out of your mouth is really believable because it's centered. You're not talking rubbish all the time. And when you give generosity to someone from that place, it is such a remarkable feeling of joy internally. It really, really is. So we got to really get to understand generosity and really begin to move towards that place where it's not a set of incentive programs or extra cash or a nice day out or a hamper. I mean, these things are just like, you got to get rid of that.
Right.
And be truly generous.
Yeah. And this is what comes back to leading self first. I mean, there's a quote in the book, I think it says, change yourself, change the culture, change the world.
Yeah.
And
yeah, carry on.
Yeah, no, and everything we're talking about in terms of being able to create a different work culture is predicated on doing the inner work.
Yeah, because work is just something we do. It's not who we are.
Mm.
It's self culture. You can't work in your corporate culture until you work in your self culture. You know, we learn. We've learned from our predecessors and all of this. We haven't changed our architectural operating models really since the Industrial Revolution. They really haven't. And they're no longer fit for purpose. We have to tear it all up, start again, and put human at the front, put ourselves at the front, put soul at the front, put soul at the center, not the front, soul at the center. And just start working on these things. It'll take time, but we need to do it because we are, how long can we continue when we've got 9% of our GDP being lost every single year to poor productivity? $9 trillion a year. How long can we continue when you've got United Nations saying we're now in a suicide at work pandemic? This is it.
Yeah.
Leaders, this is what we're facing now. You've got to pay attention to this. These are real metrics that are happening. How long can a business survive if 80% of the workforce is disengaged? How long can you survive? You've got 20% who are just the old 80-20 rule, isn't it? That 20% are doing all the work. Well, it's a lot more serious than that. It's the same kind of level, but a lot more serious.
Yeah.
And it's not right. It's not right. We know we've got a deeply anxious world because all the other factors that we have in it, we've got social, we've got mobile phone, we've got the news 24/7, all these other factors are really drawing into the epicenter of our stress and anxiety. But we have a responsibility as business leaders to acknowledge that and deal with it. We've got to deal with it. Can't say this is not my problem. This is not a home-based problem. That is an immature and naive thing to think.
Yeah.
It's my call to business leaders. Pay attention. This is serious. We are very close to hitting a wall and crashing, but we can now change it. And to me, compassion is one of the ways that we can change it. True compassion as a strategy, not a skill.
Yeah. So one of the challenges I face when I engage in this conversation with other leaders is around time to make this happen. I remember talking to a friend of mine who runs meditation retreats, and he relayed the story that he'd invited a bunch of his sort of fellow CEOs and executives to come on this meditation retreat, and several of them have said to him, "Oh yeah, this is Shashin Shah. I'm sure he won't. He's been on the podcast. I'm sure he won't mind me saying his name." It's all very well, Shashin, but that's the sort of thing that I'll have time to do when I retire, which is a sort of echo of some of the things I hear sometimes. Yes, which is all very well, but when am I going to find time to sit in meditation or do these self-reflection sessions? When my diary is as it is, and I've got kids and family commitments, how do I make time for this? What's your response to that challenge?
I think we have the easiest way of including meditation or mindfulness or just a break to get centered every single day, probably 7 or 8 times a day. My recommendation would be, first of all, get off your silly horse and realize that time is not on your side. For me, time is not on my side, right? So wake up. You never know what's going to happen. It could be gone like that. And so how do you combat this? First of all, just get centered and realize that this stuff is really important. A little trick could be just take the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes of every single meeting just to sit with everyone in meditation. Just sit in the moment. If you're starting off, I'd love for this to happen. If you're starting off a meeting, you don't have to use the word prayer, but do something like that. Just say, listen, we're going to take a bit of time. We're going to close our eyes. We're going to reflect. You might think it's woo-woo. You might. But what I'm telling you is the way that meeting will happen in the next 55 minutes will be astounding because everyone is in tune to what you're trying to achieve. There's no conflict. There'll be no, Everyone's going to be pointing in the same direction to get the best out of this meeting they can. And in the last 5 minutes, you do the same thing and just say, let's quieten our eyes a bit. Let's go quiet for a couple of minutes. Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything we've missed? So you have plenty time to do it. If you do that, you're 8 meetings a day. That's 8 times 20. That's 4 hours a day. Boom, you can do it. Go on, that's for Friday. It's an hour a day. You can do it. Right? Of course, you've got time. You've got time in the train. You've got time in the car. You've got loads of time. Stop making bullshit excuses like that. You haven't got time. Come on. Who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? So, this goes back to another thing, right? This goes back to I am a VP. I am a CEO. I am an MD. I have got no time for this. I am a superhuman being. Get off that pedestal. Get off that pedestal. Seriously. Who are you kidding? Honestly, you're not a CEO. You're a human being. You're not a VP. You're a human being. Come on. Get in tune. Get in tune, because it's gonna work against you if you don't. I'm living proof of this, right? I'm living proof. I ignored it for so long, and look at me now.
Yeah, I mean, you truly have the authority to share this message, isn't it? And
yeah. And I'm not well. But my God, am I living a life of joy? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Because I do this stuff.
Yeah. And I'm right in saying you've got two cancers right now.
Yeah. I've got advanced prostate cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah. I mean, you're testament to the power of the spiritual work. I mean, that's going on for you physically, and yet look at what you're contributing out in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I got a lot to thank Jesus for. I really do. And I would never have said that 5 years ago. Never in a million years would have I admitted that I have immense respect for that one individual that, to me, was the best business leader of all time. The best. We have so much to learn from that. If we just spend a bit of time and understood what was really going on, how to lead people, how to make change, how to grow, and still be talked about 2,000 years later.
Yeah. So if you were to share a couple of lessons from his life or his teachings that we can apply to business, what would they be?
Get out of your way. Remove this whole, which I was a professional, egotistical asshole. It's, you just got to drop the act. Drop it. And when you're able to drop the act and get centered and listen to a different voice, not the self-doubt, the self-judgment, self-criticism, then you'll give yourself a lot of space, which you desperately need. Going back to the guy that said, I haven't got time. Well, you do. I think for me, one of the biggest lessons he gave, which is not to have a conversation with the ego, have a different conversation. And I think the biggest lesson for me, which is now my life, I guess, is this living a life of compassion. Take action. And where you see disruption, where you see problems in the world, deal with it, act with it. Where you see difference, be open-minded, be tolerant, accept the difference. Where you see harm, where you see bias, self-forgiveness. But these are powerful business traits. Honestly, they are second to none. I think for me, those are the two big lessons. Drop the ego and live with compassion.
I think that's another aspect of the generational shift. I don't know if you're familiar with the stats, but from what I recall, Gen Z is far more, certainly the men of Gen Z are far more Christian than I think even their grandfathers. So there is this sort of return to spirituality. I don't know to what extent it's happening in the East, but certainly in the West.
Yeah. And bring it on, really.
Yeah.
We didn't have to be religious so much for me. It's faith. Faith in something that's not materialistic.
Right.
We've got to drop materialism in our life, no matter what that might be. Because isn't it odd that we chase these things? And again, I've done it. I'm testament. We all do it. We chase these two things that just aren't real in business. We change money and time. They're not real. They're just not real. We invented them. But this is all our center. It's all we go after. It's what we chase. It's what we crush other businesses on. It's why we have war. We have these things. And I know, and listen, I know I'm not naive to think this isn't the way that business is made on, because it is. But there's a better way to chase these things that aren't real. And there's certainly something better we can do around time for everybody. For sure. We can rethink these two paradigms of money and time that drives business. And that's what they're based on, money and time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that links to our point about ego earlier, right? It's the ego that says, I don't have time, I'm too important, I can't make time for self-reflection or connection with something beyond. Yeah.
And also the ego is very, very good at hating you. Self-judgment, self-criticism, self-doubt, that's what it's there to do, right?
Yeah, when I went through your book and I did that was one of the ones I scored poorly on or less well on, was the resilience. And that was because, I scored low. I can definitely enter into self-criticism in my own head, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to get rid of. It takes time.
Yeah. This is absolutely wonderful. I wonder, is there anything we haven't touched on so far that you would have liked to have brought into this conversation?
I don't know. I think we've spoiled a lot. I always love talking to you because it goes on forever. But I think I'd like to leave a bit of advice or a bit of a phrase or just a word to anyone that's listening that might be struggling with what I'm saying, or just not believe what I'm saying, or just go, I can't get into that. That's a whole new dynamic. That's just not for me. What is he talking about? This nutter. I would just say that just give it a go. Just give yourself a break. Give yourself a bit of time. Whether you buy the book or don't, it doesn't matter to me, but just find a way that you can just become more self-aware of what's really going on around you, what's really going on internally. Become very aware of the reality, because you might be working in a business today that hasn't got any issues, but there are businesses around you that are really struggling. So just try and raise yourself above your own life and just have a look at what's going out in the market and accept that we are broken, accept that we have very difficult times that we're in, and we need to do something different. Please just look at that, become self-aware of that, become very consciously aware of that, and understand what compassion is. Understand what it is and bring it into your life. Don't be scared to do it. Have courage to do it. Be brave to do it. Because I will guarantee you, when you start doing it, your life will change immeasurably. It will go from if you're experiencing happiness, come and experience joy. If you're experiencing sadness or anxiety, enjoy happiness, then get to joy. But do that. That's the one thing I just want to say to everyone. That please, I know I'm a living testimony, as you said to it. I know so many other people that are. So come on the journey with us. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be great.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so in terms of the offer for people, there's the book which we've talked about, and go and buy that, and it's extremely accessible. It's an interactive book, right? You've got these exercises for yourself, and etc. There's also the Compassion Exchange for people that tell people about that.
So the Compassion Exchange is a online membership of which we have free membership as well. We don't want to discredit anybody. And it is...
Ian's just taken an interest in this.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome along, Passionate.
As soon as you hear the word compassionate cat there, I'm like, so it's an online membership aimed at combating all the things I just talked about. So it's not a refuge so much, but it's aimed at all the workforce. It's aimed at middle managers, junior managers on their pathway to greatness, and senior leaders who need to change things, look at the operating model. There's a membership community which we have courses, events, playbooks. We've had even a space called The Sanctuary, which is our wellbeing place. We've even got a wellbeing radio, so you can click a wellbeing radio and have music playing all day long, and great phrases being said to you all day long. There's loads of networking events. We start to meet each other. We've got a champion space. So in the champion space, this is where we're really asking our senior leaders to push a boundary of thinking. We have a conversations like what's the impact of AI on your corporate culture? How do you really think that's going to happen? We're talking about how you're doing layoffs with compassion. We've got loads of things going on. So it's a membership community focused purely on the world of compassion, but this is not the world according to Nigel. It's not. So we have a whole host of amazing coaches that our members can get access to, whether it might be around, I just need a bit of knowledge about self-forgiveness, or it might be a CEO or a founder. Everyone's talking about psychosocial safety. What does that really mean? Well, we've got our consulting group that talks about that. There's we've got behavioral scientists in the group. We've got clinical psychologists in the group. We've got loads of people. We're building this out all the time, aren't we? So I think it's just an amazing platform. So we're trying to encourage, like Dave King from Differentis, he bought it for his company, right? So he's seen the power of buying a membership like this to give to all his team. It's an incredible contribution. So that's what we're encouraging our business leaders to do, is to buy it on behalf of for your staff as a gift. Give a gift of compassion for Christmas, not a hamper, because you get measurable returns. So this whole membership it's about information, yes, but it's about this real ability to start seeing growth, start measuring this growth, start seeing a huge impact, both to work and home. So the Compassion Exchange has done something very unique, which we brought home life and work life under one roof, because we don't see a difference between the two. We see that if home life is great, work life is better. If work life is great, home life is brilliant.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And we should say, in terms of the investment for businesses, and you cite this in the book, is when the research has been done on businesses where there is a caring approach and leadership, the profits are better. The top line productivity of sales teams is better. We do know that there's this measurable business benefit to developing leaders in this way.
Huge. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for being the inspiration that you are.
Thank you.
Whilst carrying these health issues, I mean, it's just wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think also, Ricky, you are also a massive inspiration. So we've only spoken a few times, but every single time I walk away feeling blessed.
Thank you. All right. Thank you once again, and
pleasure.
I look forward to getting this out to the audience. All right. Thank you, Nigel.
Okay.